In this tutorial, I'm about to show you how to make lo-fi in the easiest way possible. We will talk about chords, beats and bass line, and we will even add in a little flair to make it kind of interesting. All of this will be done without any music theory, and I promise it will sound decent probably. And this is how to make lo-fi in the simplest way possible. The very first thing that I always do when I make lo-fi is make the chord progression. And in order to do that in the easiest way possible, go to the plus sign and hit none. Then you will have a sampler here. Go into the piano roll of the sampler. Then you will find this purple thing here. Click that and you will find scales. We are just going to pick up major now. You have the choice to pick any scale that you want essentially just by clicking one of these notes right here. So, for example, let's click B. Look at that, now we have the B major scale. Drag it all the way out and then just copy and paste it. Make sure the bottom note is B and there you go. You could do this for any note. I just picked B for this tutorial. Now, if we go back to our channel rack, we see we have this huge green block here, and that's exactly what we want. Go and add in the FL keys. Now go to the piano roll. Now we have all the notes in the key of B. We could now start making chords by going into these white ghost notes and just clicking randomly. We are going to just go to any of these notes in here. Let's just start it here. Now how do we make a chord without knowing any music theory? Skip one of these white lines and go to the next one. Skip a white line and go to the next one. Skip a white line, go to the next one. Let's see how that sounds. That sounds good. I'm going to drop it down so we are not up in the higher notes. We are going to use these notes later on. Before we continue further, keep the BPM around 80. Just pick a bass note, skip the white line, go to the next one, skip the white line, go to the next one, and so on. Now I'm going to make the chord progression and please follow along with me what I say. Hope that it sounds good. I'm going to try to make something right now and we finally have our chord progression. Let's see what it sounds like. You see how it sounds jazzy, and also the last bar here I just resolved back to the first chord that we started with to give it some kind of light resolution. Now what we could do is slide these notes around if we wanted to give a little bit of like a melody playing within the chords themselves, and I will show you what that sounds like. It will just give it a little more interesting vibe rather than just playing these chords. One little trick to make this more interesting and sound more realistic, highlight all of your chord progressions, go to the drop down, go to tools, and then you will find strum here. What that does is, it adjusts the time for each note in the chord and you could adjust the strength of it. If I slide it over, the notes get more out of place and you could also adjust the velocity too. No person or human plays at the same velocity for each key. I think that sounds really good, but how can we make this sound even more lo-fi? Assign your keys to a mixture. We have it on 10, go to the drop down. The first thing I want to do is add a little bit of reverb. This is the tail reverb and this is a way better reverb than what FL Studio gives you. Next, we are going to insert our iZeta vinyl. This is a free VST. I will put a link in the description. It is probably the best thing you could ever have for lo-fi. It's almost necessary if you are going to go with no samples. I'm going to move these knobs down. See how it made it all grainy. We will choose 1960 and then you are going to adjust this warp depth here. Let's see what that sounds like. I will set it to 20%. One thing I sometimes do with this is you could clone this, then copy and paste, and then switch these to rows. This is going to act like a pad. It will give a little bit of effect in the background. I'm going to move this over to a different mixer channel now because I want to adjust the volume separately from the main piano. So we are going to do the exact same thing, add iZeta vinyl and add some reverb. We're going to adjust the volume a little bit. This gives it a little bit of atmosphere kind of. It just makes it a fuller sound. So we are done with our chords and it was super easy, right? So the next thing we will add is the beat. Download this sample folder. I will put a link also in the description and it is free. Let's start with the snare first. We are going to start on the first block in this red section. They're always here in every single lo-fi song. You can adjust around with what you want to be more prominent in the mixer section. Something else you could do is adjust the velocity, so each one gives it a little bit of bounce. We will do the exact same thing for the hi-hats. We will do it every two. I also added in an open hi-hat before the snares just to give it a little bit of variation. Another thing you could do is to add a little bit of bounce and make it sound more lo-fi. Go to your hi-hats, click this little wrench tool here, then you will see this thing called shift. This actually shifts the notes slightly to the right. It gives a little bit of like offbeat kind of jump to the whole beat. Another little tip here is if you want to add a little bit of bounce, you could go to these sections here in your hi-hats. Scroll it over to the middle of the box here. It gives a little bit of bounce. Now, where the main bounce comes from in the song is the kick. You could do the same bounce technique that we did with the hats and just scroll this over. Alright, I mess around with this quite a bit and here's our beat. Now we want to add a melody, so we are going to add another FL keys. We are going to go into that and look at this. We already have our ghost notes like before. So what you could do here is just solo over the chords that are happening. If you have no music theory, you just put notes randomly here and hope it sounds good. And honestly, if you're going to stick to the ghost notes, you are probably going to be fine. You just have to have the nice musical sense that goes with it. I'm going to try to mess around in here and I'm going to see if I could find some of the way to solo over the keys in a way that sounds good. Now it's time for the bass line. We are going to add another sampler. I will use Contact 5, but you can use anything. I'm sure there are a lot of ESD plugins out there that sounds far better than Contact. All you have to do is go to the bass note of your chord. Just put a bass note where that is, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. To do that, we are going to delete the sampler channel and go to the piano roll of your bass, and we see the chords right here. You'll see if this sounds good. That sounds jazzy, and that's literally all you have to do. You don't have to know anything about creating bass line or music or anything like that. Just put the bass note at the bottom note of your chord because that is the bass note and it's going to sound good. One small thing that we could add is a horn. I like using horns. I'm going to use Contact 5. We are kind of just going to inverse what we did with the bass line. Just going to put something at the top note of each chord now. You will notice here the top note is the same as the last one here. But what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of differentiation. So you could really put it on any note that you want to within the chord. You could really do this with any instrument that you want to. It doesn't have to be a horn. One little kind of trick that I do here, I'm going to do is shorten all these notes. I'm going to put this in one of our channel racks. Now, I'm going to add argento vinyl as an effect. I'm going to add a little reverb at the same time. I'm going to add in a delay stereo effect. Now after all of this, to do the mastering, all you have to do is go to your drop down and your master channel. Now go to Maximus, then select presets fancy Lofi. Now adjust according to what you like. We are going to go into the controller here of Maximus and then just drop this a little bit. And then just adjust it until you think it sounds good. I wanted to make this the simplest way possible, and that's why I put it in one single channel rack. If you want to separate each individual one of these, all you have to do is right click, cut, go to the next pattern and then paste it. Then that would be your chord. Do the same thing for every single other instrument. That way you could separate things if you want something to come in the later or sooner. Now we have our beat. The chords, the pads, the solo, the bass line, and finally the saxophone. So now that I have everything separated and I kind of just compose it all together. One final thing that you could add is some tape driven beats here. This is going to elevate the whole beat. I found a sample here that has no kick because I already put the kick in, and then we are going to see what it sounds like. It just adds a lot more texture and depth. I hope that you learned something. Honestly, the chords are probably the hardest part of all of this, And I think it's so simple if you just use that blank channel rag technique and then use the stamp tool. Thank you for learning this section. Now let's move on to the next section.